This is going to be uncomfortable, but I need to address this. Been seeing a lot of this on my feed. Jew. And I've not made any attempts to hide that I'm openly Jewish, that I raise my family. We have an Orthodox Jewish home. And this is showing up on my feeds more and more. When my videos get more attention, inevitably this comes up. So I want to talk about what this means to me when I see it. It's not going to be any mystery to anybody who interacts with the medical system that Jews are overrepresented in the medical system. There are a lot of Jewish doctors out there. I know that's not going to be a shock to anybody. Why do you think that is? It's for the simple reason that the singular highest Jewish value, above every other Jewish value, is saving lives, preserving life. In fact, it's so important that every other law, custom, and value is suspended in order to be able to potentially save another human life. And it doesn't matter whether that human life is wrapped in any particular package, color, religion, it doesn't change. There is a sacred understanding of the divinity of human life, and that all people and all humans rise to that level, and therefore we're mandated to put aside everything to help another person that way. So when I see this, that's the value that I think of, and the value that I live by, and the value that I practice by when I'm either taking care of patients in my office, in the pediatric ER, in the hospital, in the nursery, wherever I go. And I do know that in the comment section, we're going to get references to the Israel-Palestine war, and it's a tragedy. I don't think any pediatrician of any stripe can feel anything but sadness at the loss of life. I feel sadness when I think about Jewish babies that were ripped away from their parents and beheaded and burned and slaughtered in front of them. And I feel sadness thinking about the people of Gaza who were dragged into that situation and then sacrificed by their leadership needlessly. So that's all I'm going to say about that. So when I see this word, when this word comes up, I think of the value that I live by and that I try to model for my children and for my family.
So when you made this video, it's obviously been months, years since October 7th, where anyone who is in any way obviously Jewish in public life or even in private life has faced this just level of anti-Semitism that I certainly, since being in America since 2013, have never seen the mainstreaming of it. What pushed you to that point? Because you could have made that video at any point since October 7th, 2023, and it would have made perfect sense.
I could have. You know, it's really interesting, your last statement. You know, I grew up in America. I was born in 1970. I was raised in suburban Washington, D.C. In the 70s and 80s. And then I went on to Philadelphia and then on to Baltimore. That's college, med school residency, and then Colorado the last 25 years. Anti-Semitism in my childhood and young adult life was a myth, literally a myth. It was a story told by my grandparents that was very nice, but had literal zero application in my lived experience through my entire adult life, literally. And it would, and maybe you heard echoes of it through, and just, I'm completely non-political. I didn't even vote in the last election, to be perfectly honest. You would hear echoes of maybe this happened during the Trump campaign or this or that, but it was never in front of me until October 7th. As a religious Jew, someone who wears this in public and live in an Orthodox Jewish community and walking to and from synagogue on the Sabbath, all of a sudden it was part of my life at age 55. And increasingly, mostly an online thing as my social media has grown. I've been doing social media as part of my business and my practice since 2020 or 2019, but has gotten out much bigger in the last year for whatever reason. And with that increasing exposure came the online social media anti-Semitism flooding my feed. At least it feels that way, because maybe it's only a third of all my comments, but of course our brains always only look at the negative. We hyper focus on that. And it was really disturbing. It really disturbed me to my core. In my lived experience outside of that, the community where I practice in is not at all. They embrace me, and they love that I'm an outwardly religious person. The community where I live is a suburban Orthodox Jewish community mixed into a non-Jewish community, and very little outside of a drive-by, epithet or slur yelled out of a car window. Not much else. But now we have an armed guard at our synagogue most days, and 2 on the Shabbat and holidays. And so when the comments started, it was probably the better part of the last 6 months. I would either erase them or ignore them, or let my audience fight it out in the comments. But it became increasingly intrusive, and I at least felt the need to directly address it instead of sweeping it under the rug and pretending that I don't see it. And with that, it was obviously loaded because of the Israel-Gaza-Palestinian war started by Hamas, and I have very strong feelings about that. I have a daughter that has just made Aliyah and lives in Israel. I have family that lives there. I know the history. I feel very, very connected to not just the recent events. So the throwaway apartheid genocide thing I hate, because it's just ignorance, and so I had to address it. You can't address one these days. You can't address one as a pediatrician, because I'm talking about health. That's what I get confronted with. So I had to just say it all.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about, I think one of the really interesting parts of the video was your presentation of the protection of life as a Jewish value, which of course, anyone who knows anything about Judaism, we're both Jews, we know that is central to your existence as a Jew. Yeah. So life becomes more important than anything else. Right. What I found so fascinating, if you look at this, if you set the emotion aside, which is very, very difficult to do. If you look at this almost in an academic sense, it's the inversion of the accusations. When you have everything that we are accused of as Jews, not even as Israelis, just as Jews, applies to the same people who are trying to destroy people in the Middle East and across the world simply because they are Jews.
Yes.
How have you dealt with that? I'm sure you've gotten pushback on this. I don't know if you've engaged with that
100%.
pushback.
The problem is that it is, as you know, it is such a nuanced discussion that takes so long to unwind. It's not amenable to a comment section or a 3-minute video. I know in my heart that Israel's actions are geared towards protecting life at all costs whenever possible, both the lives of Israeli citizens, and that's why October 7th couldn't be ignored. But the IDF, which has its faults, no one is, anyone who has been directly connected can't say that the IDF never makes mistakes or never does something incorrect. But people who intimately know that the IDF in the probably most complex, densely populated combat or battle space that's ever been created between Gaza and the tunnels, to continually make great efforts, even at the risk of their own troops, to minimize and give the opportunity for civilians to leave and to relocate and to signal their intentions, to do their best. And even in any war scenario, it's still not going to be enough. And as a pediatrician, I grieve and I experience pain for the plight of children in Gaza, but it is also my strong conviction that all of that is lays firmly at the feet of Hamas and no one else. It is Hamas that has inspired and brainwashed 2 generations of children in that region, that the highest form of good is to ensure the death of Jews generally and Israelis specifically. And there is no higher calling for an adult than to martyr themselves or their children to that cause. So even the best IDF efforts often result in no response, because they're dealing with a group of people that welcome it and want it. And like Golda Meir said, Golda Meir's words still echo through October 7th, which is that until they love their children more than they love death, or I don't know the quote exactly, but that's the point. Until the Arabs and the Palestinians love their children as much as they love death or more than they want to kill us, there's not going to be an end to this.
What the most frustrating thing for me is whenever I go on colleges and high schools quite often to talk about this issue, and there's a divide that I found is there's the ignorant and there's the frankly evil. Most people are ignorant who've been taken in by the evil, and when you try and actually present the facts that you just presented, the reality of what Israel is trying to do or the Israeli military is trying to do, the reality of the enemy they face, I think there's just a naivety that almost speaks to the reality of peace that we all enjoy. I mean, I grew up in the UK where anti-Semitism was a thing. Like, we lived with an awful lot of anti-Semitism, specifically Muslim anti-Semitism that came along with immigration, which is a topic we should all talk about.
And we now know that it's also important. BBC anti-Semitism now.
Oh,
apparently,
BBC endorsed.
Yeah,
I think the funniest thing about the BBC story,
exactly.
a quick side note on that, my favorite thing about the BBC is when they translated the Arabic for Jew into Israeli to try and make it seem like it was just about Israel.
Oh, yes.
When of course it's not about Israel. It's all about the people who live in Israel.
Yes.
It's all about the Star of David on that flag. But the fact that you grew up in America without really facing severe anti-Semitism, I think applies to people of all different backgrounds. The fact that America is generally so peaceful, so tolerant, so open, that I feel we're almost vulnerable to this level of ignorance-based hate, where you can be fed these things and you can't quite believe that there are people like Hamas out there. You cannot believe that there are people who are willing to do the kind of things they're willing to do. Yeah. That's really hard to get through to people with.
I agree. I think that, and I'm gonna. I think and I know that you probably agree here. Ben Shapiro probably is one of the clearest voices about this and how that works with regards to applying American, specifically in Western values, onto a region that is you can't apply them to. And I'm going to preface this: I don't agree with everything Ben Shapiro says. I don't. On this topic, he happens to be the most articulate and the clearest voice for the Jewish community and the Jewish point of view. But that American academics and college students and young people in America simply just look at it with this metric of oppressed and oppressor, and it seems to be a very convenient template to lay over top of this because it looks like it falls right in the lines. You have Israelis that look white, a lot of them, although it's completely disregarding Mizrahi and Middle Eastern and Sephardi Jews that were kicked out, forcibly removed from most of the communities that had been present for thousands of years, and forced, and Israel saved them, as well as the remnants of European Jewry that was slaughtered in the Holocaust. But it seems like a very simple rubric to apply, and the truth is, it has no application to this at all. Americans can't fathom that a group of people wouldn't simply want the same things they want. Don't they just want financial security and the opportunity to work and jobs and happiness for their children? It seems to make perfect sense because it fits our model exactly. And the Hamas propagandists have perfectly manipulated that view and perfectly manipulated that desire for Americans to apply that to this group of people. But unless you've lived there and understand the dynamics of that region and understand who Hamas is and who the Palestinian Authority is, and the fact that Palestinians were just Jordanians until they were manufactured by Yasser Arafat with Russian propaganda help, but that's all complex history. That's too much. It's so much easier just to say it's white people oppressing brown people, white people who might have all come from Europe, without recognizing the reality of it and 2,000 years of Jewish presence or more in Jerusalem and in Israel. So hard, so much easier just to say this, and they can't fathom that those people actually don't want any of those things. They want and embrace death for themselves, in order to accomplish death for this entire group of people and wiping them off the map. That's not a concept that is easily understood or absorbed by college students and American liberals, and even American liberal Jews who have no connection to Israel just because they've never been there, because their parents never sent them or they never did birthright. So it's so much easier. And that reality is not, it's hard to wrap our heads around. So they just don't.
Yeah. And also the understanding of the double standard that's inherent in anti-Semitism, which I think a lot of people, again, through ignorance, don't quite understand, of the holding Jews, not even Israeli Jews, just Jews generally, holding them accountable for the imaginary crimes of the IDF, or expecting Jews to defend Israel. I mean, the fact that Jews in America are routinely accused of being behind what's going on in Israel, let's assume the false premise that everything they say about Israel is true. Why is an American Jew who's never been to Israel, some of them have never even left the state, why are they responsible? It's the deep anti-Semitism at the heart of all of it.
Correct. And that strong idea that anti-Zionism really just is rebranded anti-Semitism because it feels more comfortable, feels more geopolitical instead of personally.